Most people do not see God at work in their personal lives and therefore do not know how to join Him. This Divine Appointments podcast is to encourage you in your faith, to open your eyes to seeing God's hand at work. My hope and prayer is that by hearing these stories, you too will engage where God is already working and discover God's mission for your life.
Welcome. It's so good to see you all. We're so happy to be a part of this Christian Medical and Dental Association celebration. I've known Dr. Moma for a shorter time than Dr. McMullen.
I'm a lot older now, so.
Right. But it's been a pleasure to get to know him and Miss Rita and of course Dr. McMullen. You were a resident, right? I mean, when I was a medical student, you were a resident.
That was
So
back when
we're
we used to have to
dating both
chisel
of
your
us.
charts.
Exactly.
The
It
good
was a
old days.
millennium ago.
It was in the, as my children say, the last century.
That's right, exactly.
But anyway, it's great to be here. I'll start sort of with our story, but I just thank you for the invitation.
And I'm just here to keep her moving. That's really why I'm here. Just kind of watching the clock.
Joe has a wonderful testimony as well, for the record, so I don't know if we're
Right,
going to that.
which we are going to get to that. So, and Mary Claire and Tyler, I know a little bit about y'all and your families, your extended families, but Mary Claire, official title is you are the head of the side-by-side ministry, is that right?
I am in place of the speaker tonight. She
Okay.
would not be here.
Okay.
I'm second in place.
Second in command.
Second in command.
She's first in command in her family. But side-by-side, I understand, is the spouses group for Christian Medical and Dental Association. So thank you for representing. So our story, next Sunday, we will have been married 29 years.
And when we started going over this earlier today, she said, I'm like, that's really next Sunday? I had no clue. So first
Next
marriage advice, you
Sunday.
should probably have a clue about that. That is next Sunday, okay.
And we dated all in high school like 10 years before that. So we know each other so well that he can interrupt me and tell me when I'm off cue here.
We teach together a lot.
But this is how we teach Sunday school every Sunday morning, and so our class is used to us interrupting each other. So just so you know, if I get to talking too long, he'll say, okay. He'll refocus.
Most of the time when we're teaching, it's her saying, look at the notes, look
Come on, you
at
gotta
it's
go.
me running all. This is hers though.
That's right.
I'll do
But
this
we
to you.
have three sons. We do have three sons. Will is 22, Reed is 19, and John is 16. And we don't stand here saying it's all sunshine and rainbows, and we got this all figured out. But as fellow Christians, fellow believers, followers of Jesus Christ who walk with a limp, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. But we have three areas of advice today for you. First, we want to.
This was my job, is to keep it organized. First, this is the first point. If you're watching, this is the first point.
You don't know this, but he is the notes. He has like very organized notes when we teach. And so it's really bothering him that you don't have notes in front of
That's
you.
right.
So
You don't have the notes.
the CPA mind. But life is hard, and that you will walk with a limp at some point in your life.
If you don't already.
Joel always says, don't trust a man who doesn't walk with a limp. And that comes from the story in the Bible about Jacob. If you know Genesis 32, and you know Jacob was a man who walked with a limp. And just to give you the background of that, remember he was going into the promised land commanded by God to go in and take the land, and he was coming upon his brother Esau, and Esau, Jacob was the trickster, right, the deceiver, and he tricked Esau, so he was really worried about going back into the land, and he thought that Esau was going to kill him.
He tricked Esau. Just most of you probably already know the story, but he tricked Esau to get his birthright, which meant he was going to be the firstborn, declared the firstborn, get the firstborn blessing, which in a sense means he stole from Esau. Esau. So he has to flee. He's going out, but God tells him. Well, I found it interesting when we were talking about this today. It kind of reminded me. God told him to go back, but he immediately started doubting because he was fearful. If God told him to go back, he would expect to say, "Well, then I'll just head on back. God's got this." No, what did he do? He freaked out because he was afraid his brothers were going to kill him. So the first thing I thought of, does that mean doubt is sin? It means, well, we were talking about this today, doubt in and of itself is normal. We constantly have doubt. The question is, will you allow doubt to stop what God's doing? If doubt stops you, it becomes disobedience. Doubt in and of itself, it doesn't. What do you take doubt? You take doubt to God, which is what he did in this whole.
And you can see that Jacob actually did go to God
Yeah,
in
he
prayer.
went to him.
And so I'm just going to read Genesis 32:25 through 31. So Jacob was left alone, and then a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when the man saw he could not defeat Jacob, he struck the socket of his hip, so the socket of Jacob's hip was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." "I will not let you go," Jacob replied, "unless you bless me." And the man asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, "Jacob." "No longer will your name be Jacob," the man told him, "but Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have prevailed." And then Jacob asked, "Please tell me your name." "Why do you ask my name?" the man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there, and so Jacob named the place Peniel, explaining, "Certainly I have seen God face to face and have survived." And the sun rose over him as he crossed over Peniel, but he was limping because of his hip. And it's interesting, we were saying that this was a transformation really of Jacob. He prayed, he submitted to God, he stopped fighting, he was struck in his hip, so he recognized that it was no longer a man, but something supernatural. He realized, okay.
What was Jacob's name? What did it? Because the angel of the Lord, which we found out to be God himself, asked him, "What is your name?" As if God didn't know. He wanted him to say his name. What was his name? His name was Jacob. What does that mean? Your Bible tells you what that. It was hill grabber, deceiver, trickster. And he was saying, I am changing you from that today to a new name, Israel, one who strives with God. On that day, to use a New Testament term, Jacob was born again that night. Because he went from his old self to his new self after struggling with God. It's a cool thing going on there. Yeah.
And Israel means God fights, and it was both a promise and a call for faith. And my study note says to be successful with God means that he, Jacob, had to be crippled in his own self-sufficiency. And so that's really where the idea of walking with a limp is being crippled in your own self-sufficiency. Jacob was not in the condition to receive that blessing initially. Once his striving had reached its climax, God put him in a position to receive the blessing. He wrestled with that angel of the Lord all night long, and when he awakened, he was only ever able to walk with a limp thereafter.
From there to the day he died. That memory of that night and that struggle with God was with him forever. He walked with a limp.
He was forever changed, but God had a purpose for it. He was to follow God no matter what, no matter how hard it is with your limp. God says, "Follow me." And so we go to the New Testament, and Paul tells us that he also had a limp. He had a thorn in the flesh. 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10. He said, in the passage before that, he defends his ministry. He talks about his qualifications as a Hebrew above Hebrews. He listed all the ways he suffered for Christ. And then he also had great revelations, but then he says, "To keep me from being conceited, a thorn in the flesh was given to me." If you read in this 9 and 10, God said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest upon me."
So he had a thorn in the flesh, and Paul tells you why. Because of the great revelations that God had given him, that the insights that God had given him, he knew he would become proud, that he'd be puffed up and proud. And that's just a little tidbit of a little advice here. Human tendency is always to become proud. Always. If left to our own devices, we will be proud. We will be our own gods, we will be proud, and we will take credit for everything. And what God says to follow me is to be humble. And for Paul, with all these great revelations, God left the thorn in the flesh for a very specific reason. That pride will separate you from God. Without that pride, his heart can stay close to him. So that weakness was necessary, desperately necessary. That limp was necessary for Paul.
So I'm going to tell you a little story about our walking with a limp. And this was in 2014 on a sunny day in May. And I was in surgery that day. I do robotic surgery, as you said so nicely. And we were assisting each other, so it was my partner's case, so I was actually scrubbed in assisting. And I didn't know this, but Mr. Fix-It here, he has this business. He's a CPA, but he's a jack of all trades, and he said he could fix everything. And so was going to fix a plumbing problem. He crawled on our roof.
I went running that morning. I didn't have to be at work till 9, so it was probably 8:30, maybe. I don't remember what time it was.
Probably.
But I was thinking, I just went running that morning, so before I take a shower and everything, I'll jump on the roof and fix the faucet, fix the cord.
So I was at work, and the boys were at school, and our housekeeper was there at our house, and Joel fell off our roof onto our slate patio, and we think, he doesn't remember, he fell head first.
Somehow
braced his hands a little because he had broken wrists.
Yeah, only 10 feet high. It was a relatively low roof, but somehow from that 10 feet, I got completely flipped and hit head first. I have no idea how that.
So for the medical people, temporal bone fractures destroyed his whole vestibular canal and all of the hearing and balance and everything. So in surgery, my phone rings and it's from our housekeeper, and I'm scrubbed in, and she never calls me because he's always in and out of the house. He's the first person to call, and it's just easier to reach. So first little red flag. Then the nurse, who's my friend, is yes, okay, it's going on and on. I'm like, what is it, Lana? What is it? What's going on? And she's talking and listening and just not saying anything. By that time, I'm getting nervous, like something bad is happening. I know something bad. You just have that intuition. And then she goes over to my partner and whispers in his ear. And I was like, at this point, ripping my scrub attire off, and I'm like, tell me right now what's going on, and freaking out a little bit. And she said that Joel's fallen off our roof and he's alive, and she's called the ambulance, and that's about all the information I had. And like a crazy woman, I took off for the Baptist ER where I was and told them, get on that sound system and call and tell that ambulance to come here. And I'm like giving orders like I know what I'm doing, and they're like, hold up, tell me what's happened, and this is a trauma, he's gonna go to UMC. And so plan number 2, I'm jumping in my car and driving, get home, and he's they're getting him on a gurney,
and what she's about to say is a lesson for the UMC people here. What they let her do.
Well, this is pre-COVID.
Yeah, this is pre-COVID.
So they load him
This
in the
is funny.
ambulance, and we're I'm driving by myself behind him in my little minivan. And at that point, I was like, okay, who do I call? Like, you just know you're supposed to call somebody for help. Call for help, and I always call him. And my family is in Florida, and his mom is elderly and couldn't come at that time, and your sister was out of the state. I mean, I was like, I literally couldn't think of anybody to call. And I am driving behind him behind the ambulance. It was so surreal. And I remember driving down Woodrow Wilson to UMC to the ER, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm completely alone, and just the Lord flooded my mine was Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The whole chapter just over and over again. And I walked into that ER with I still had my scrubs and coat on, and I walked into the room where he was, and I think they thought I was somebody that was supposed to be there.
They just
And
met her.
I'm watching him decompensate in front of me. Like, I watched them decide, that he needed to be intubated, and about the time they were saying what allergies, blah, 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 they're doing the cervical spine, that they're checking him, rolling him, and all the trauma evaluation. And I'm like, he doesn't have any allergies. And I started spitting things out, and they're like, oh, maybe she's a family member and not a physician in charge. So anyway, all that to say, we had sweet friends like Dr. McMullen that came to visit us, and people at UMC, but it was not my area, not my people anymore. And he was in the neuro ICU for a week, and a long recovery. He has 3 years later, he got a cochlear implant. He has a cochlear implant on his side.
Learned to walk again.
Learned to walk again. He couldn't drive with little kids. He couldn't drive, and with our work schedule, anyway, it was a very difficult time. Long road to recovery. He literally and physically and spiritually, we walked with a limp after that. So as we walk through these struggles in life, we had to learn to depend on other people, to ask for help, to stand on our faith. There were some dark days of questioning and first life, and then disability, and praise the Lord that he's standing here today. But there were some scary times. So our advice
Very
is
stubborn man who refused to admit he couldn't do anything, which is a lot of the problem.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I didn't
She
say
don't want to
that.
tell you, but I do have those memories. If I was supposed to mow the yard, then I was going to figure out a way to do it. It was insane. Anyway.
And he was coaching three
Coaching
tournament
three
baseball
baseball
teams
teams
at the same time.
Right.
So we had little boys. So he's keeping me on track. So if you don't walk with a limp yet, the odds are in your lifetime, if you haven't already, you will walk with a limp. You'll have decisions about how to handle that struggle. And really for me, for us, it was learning complete dependence on the Lord, not just checking a box and putting my spiritual life over here, but complete dependence, seeing him at work, seeing the answered prayers, and in turn giving grace and understanding for others that you see that walk with the limp. God speaks to us, teaches us through our hard times. So life is hard.
That was point one. Life is hard. You will walk with a
You will walk with a limp.
Eventually, you just will. And don't trust anybody who doesn't.
So,
That's my other side of it.
So the next thing really that led to for me was to look for divine appointments, divine interventions. Pay attention. Pay attention, Meredith.
This is point number 2. Pay attention.
We learn to look for divine interventions in our lives and divine appointments. One thing I learned during COVID is that every person you meet has some kind of struggle going on. They might be walking with a limp, they might be in pain, they're isolated, they're sad, but everybody has something going on. They're an imager of God. Pay attention to people. I'm talking to myself. Pay attention to people. Joel says all I do all day is talk to women all day long.
She'll come home tired. Maybe all you do is talk to women all day. She doesn't
Which
appreciate
is
that.
true, but in all my exam room after exam room after exam room, I get to spend a little bit of time with women and husbands. I get to look into their lives. Sometimes when that door is shut, there are tears that flow. I get to find out what is going on in their lives, and I see their struggles, but I also see how God is using them and using their families and God-given gifts and talents And I began to see God at work by looking for these divine appointments. Because you can see God working in ways in your life, and you can ask God to show you these divine appointments.
Tell them about that one.
So one divine appointment that really kind of solidified this for me is as he said, we teach at First Baptist Jackson, but we're also involved with City Church, which is inner city near Meredith South, CMMC, Raymond Road, South Jackson.
It was birthed out of an apartment complex behind Metro Center.
So there was, in that apartment complex years ago, some teenage, young 20s
Oh, yeah.
guys
City Church.
decided they had a burden to take lunches and try to minister at this apartment complex near Metro Center. So on Saturdays,
So they just show up in a van.
they
This
show up
crazy group
with
of
little
20
brown bags
Yeah.
of corn dogs and chips and Capri Suns, and they
And-
started taking them.
Pretty hardcore kind of environment. Let's just put it that way.
Right, and they just started going and kept going, and then they would have little Bible studies outside with the kids, and then eventually maybe some parents would come and they would
This
just
went
come
on for
outside.
5 or 6 years.
Then there was
Every
a school
single Saturday.
next door called Clausel. They would meet in the school, and then
After a few
eventually
years.
it became a church.
Mhm.
And then they started meeting at Mission First for a while, and then now there's a church called Westview Baptist. Their doors were closing, and they just gave them the keys. And now
Can I just say one little tiny thing about that? Westview Baptist Church, we grew up in South Jackson, so we knew Westview Baptist Church. Little bitty small church down from CMMC,
that's right.
CMMC, right there, right on that corner of Raymond Road. It was a little Baptist church, and we grew up in South Jackson at a different Baptist church, and back then, it had a little small youth group and all that kind of stuff. And at this point, that church had completely died. It was dead. And like the last little elder of the church had a key, and when this group from City Church walked in, he basically said, "Here, take it." Threw them the keys and walked out the door. Still left their Bible, there were drinks on the thing, the whole place had fallen apart. And if you go to that place today, it is the most alive, incredible impact for Jesus Christ that you can imagine. And I just laugh because what appeared to be dead, God said, "Oh no, I got a long plan for that place." You just show up there on a Sunday morning and see this multiracial, incredible ministry. It's just,
Awesome.
Anyway, what man thought was dead wasn't even close to dead.
That's so true.
Mhm.
So there's this boy.
That wasn't in the notes, I'm sorry.
There's this, that was extra.
That's extra.
This little African American boy named Ishmael Harley, and he was about 8 years old when they first started coming with the lunches. And we started going there a little later. The travel stud boys would go and help in the nursery, and Ish was a little older than my oldest, so he's now like 24. But we called him Ish, very outgoing, just life of the party, fun. But when he was ministered to by this group, he had another friend named Mario, and they were like the two key boys that grew up.
That were in the apartment complex.
And so together they really grew up. They came to faith in Christ, and Ish was on fire for the Lord. He would witness to anybody, anywhere.
Still will.
Still will.
Right.
And he got to be friends with our boys. He would come to our house. We would go out to dinner, lunch after church, and all kinds of stuff. Knew him for a couple of years. Well, then at a Christmas program, about 2 years into this,
At City Church, late on a Sunday night, dark outside, at City Church.
so there's his mother. He was mostly raised by his grandmother, but his mother was there. She was not super involved in the church. And we were going out to the car to get some presents to take in, and his mother stops me in the parking lot and said, did you ever work at UMC? And I said, well, yes ma'am, a long time ago, I trained there. I trained there. She goes, did you deliver babies? And I said, yes ma'am, I did. And she goes, just matter of factly, you delivered my son Ishmael. I was like, what?
24 years after holding him in a delivery room, we've been ministering with him for 2 years at that point. It's unbelievable.
It still gives me chills right now. I was so freaked out. I just ran inside and I just grabbed him. I'm going to tell you something.
I delivered
He's
you.
like, what? I said, I delivered you. It was just so great because I was just a resident. You know, you don't get to know these people and know them your whole, you know, outside of that. You don't usually know who you delivered back then. But this was like
A divine appointment.
And it was God just reaching down and saying, you held that baby 24 years ago and in the delivery room.
Again, not in the notes, but it does. It gives you the sovereignty of God. God understood that day 24 years ago.
Yes.
We are clueless. What's happening in your life right now, God fully understands. And we are generally clueless.
We are clueless.
And that's okay. That's where faith comes in.
So that led to me, we just love that story, and I kept saying, I had already talked about City Church. It's such a neat how it's grown into what it birthed into a church from that Bible study. I'm like, somebody needs to tell this story. Somebody needs to tell this story. We need to video this and share it. It's so great. And then when that happened, I'm like, Ish, this is so great. We should tell this story. I mean, nobody will believe it. And it's just hilarious. Like, he's talking about how it was when he was 8 years old and these people came in and he was looking at these strangers going, don't you be knocking on that door. In his little 8-year-old brain, there's some drug heads that live in that door. They'll kill you.
You
They'll
get shots,
shoot
you
you.
knock on that door. He's thinking like this when
He's
they
like,
show up.
what are all these people doing? What do you need from us? So anyway, it was just so funny. We would just laugh about it. And I kept saying, somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to show this story. And then just during COVID, I'll briefly share, this is really how God called me to obey him. Our church, First Baptist Women's Ministry, for all the isolation and people not meeting at church, they decided to do a video series. And I had been asked before to share my story, my testimony, and I was just like,
Let me say too, at this point,
I don't really do that.
Meredith was not on Facebook, she was not on Instagram, didn't have any of that. Deliberately stayed completely off of any form of
shied
social
away
media.
from it. I just like, ugh.
And that's part of why she would always say no when they would ask you to do stuff like this.
Right. So our music, our women's minister, Cindy Townsend, she then during COVID sent me a text and called me and said, I really want you to do one of these videos. And I said, what is it for? And she said, all the women, we're asking them to share their Psalm 23 video.
I mean, just what was your take on Psalm 23?
And I was like,
Why was that important to you?
oh, I can't say
That's what
that.
she was saying in the behind the ambulance when I was in the hospital.
It was like an almost audible voice of the Lord saying, it's time. It's time to share your story. It's time to be obedient. It's time to quote Joel Travelstead, quit looking for one and be one. Quit looking for someone else and be that person.
Usually that comes after complaining. You know, if your spouse is complaining, usually I'd probably say, quit looking for one and be one.
And be one.
I tell my boys that. What is the point of complaining? Quit looking for one and be one.
So
Everybody's
I did that video during COVID. I did Psalm 23 with all the garb on, the N95, the shield, the hat. Everything. When we thought our hair would get COVID, I had everything on. And I got on the film and I started taking it off as I was reciting Psalm 23 and saying that no matter what we have to put on, God is walking through that valley with us. So that video was shared and shared and shared, and
She won't tell you this. It had 75,000 views.
Wow.
A lot of views.
I didn't even know what views were then.
Yeah, she didn't go up yet. I said, you're looking at 50,000 views. Oh no, it's
That was all
75,000.
First Baptist, the reach of First Baptist, but then I was like, okay, I need to share Ish's story, and he was really my first video that I did as a YouTuber.
Like and subscribe.
As a YouTuber. And so I shared that on YouTube, and then the Lord just kept bringing people, special people in my life that I would ask. I mean, you have nothing to lose. All they can do is say no.
How many have you done now?
I think like 55.
It says like 55 videos of just divine appointments. People all the way from right here to
Yes.
just folks that have a cool story, divine appointment.
So every time I feel silly and crazy for doing this, God sends me some encouraging word. The original word was a patient said about that Psalm 23 video. I was in my room, I was isolated, I was depressed, no one, with COVID, not having anybody get out, and she said, I watched that video over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think of the 75,000 views, she might have been 70,000. Over and over and over.
It's just that one lady.
This is one lady watching it.
But anyway, that was the encouragement.
What was
So,
point 2? This was the ending of point 2.
look for divine appointments in life because God is always working these out.
And with you guys in the medical field, I mean, y'all are in such an incredibly unique place to see it. More so than you just are.
So quickly, our last point
Point
is
number 3.
that God has an adventure for you, and this is our challenge for you.
Yeah, we gotta wrap this up. We go fast.
What does God desire?
What does God desire? Everybody, we teach professionals, 20-something young professionals, and we've been hitting on this a lot lately in Sunday school. Is just that's what people at that age especially, that's what you're hurting for. What does God really want me to do, and what does He? You're constantly wrestling. What does God want? And unfortunately, in our 21st century modern Christianity, it tends to turn into a long list of do's and don'ts. And it turns into a lot of prescriptives. And if you don't get up before the sun rises and have your Bible study, well, you're already going to hell. Just we get these crazy ideas of what Christianity. So, what does God want?
What does God want? What does He require of you? This is like what the first century asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment?
Shema.
If we go to the Shema, which he quoted, Deuteronomy 6:4-9, Hear, O Israel, the Lord of God, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord
What does God require? That you love the Lord.
with all your heart,
With
with
all
all
your
your soul, with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be on your heart. And then you read on, and here's your family. You shall teach them diligently to your children.
So what does God require of you? That you teach this, that you put forth His commandments, you make them a part of who you are first, and then that you teach them, starting with your children.
Teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be on the frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
You put them where you cannot possibly be distracted by the worldly cares.
Deuteronomy 10:12, and now Israel,
I love this.
what does the Lord Yahweh your God require of you? But to fear the Lord your God,
You're to fear God.
to walk in all His ways,
Walk in what He commands you to do.
to love Him,
Love Him.
to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. And then Micah 6:8, He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you?
Do you hear in any of these long prescriptions of when you're supposed to have your quiet time and when you're not? No, it's an attitude. God demands an attitude of the heart. All these are attitudes of the heart. Listen to this. I love this.
He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But
Do justice. Go ahead.
to love kindness,
To love kindness.
to walk humbly with your God.
To walk humbly with your God, which we said earlier. What did Paul need? Paul needed the thorn in the flesh to walk humbly with his God, because that's what God demands. He demands a humble spirit who serves and worships Him. That's what He demands of you.
So, Joel always says to our class, you have one job. You have one job. Just one job.
So what is that? It's what you said earlier. This is kind of cool. Read it first. What is your one job? As a
Matthew.
Christian, you have literally one job, and it has nothing to do with medicine.
Great Commission. Matthew 28:19-20. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations.
And that's important. We're going to come back to that. Go therefore and make disciples. We're going to tell you why. That's not a wonderful, it's a great translation, but it's not a wonderful translation. We'll tell you why.
Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.
So the Great Commission, that is your one job. Our Father, our commander, the one to whom we bow the knee, was being raised on, and the last thing he said is he commissioned you to do a job, and it wasn't medicine. It was to disciple them. Let me tell you why I say it that way. Because first of all, you got to look at the word go. We tend to think, and we're so bad about this in the Baptist church, we tend to think go means to get on a plane and go to Haiti, to go to Mexico. We think in terms of go is to go somewhere. But if you look at the Greek there, that's not actually what it says. What's behind that word that is translated go is as you are going in your normal life, while you're working, walking in the hospital, at the clinic, at the gym, while you are going. Now, here's the next thing that was really cool. This is something new that we looked at with a particular scholar. In Greek, the word, let's see, go therefore and make disciples. Disciples is not a noun in Greek. See, in English they always do that. They say make disciple. That puts that as a noun. It's the object of the preposition. It's a noun. It's not in Greek. You're not told to make disciples. That kind of tends, especially we Baptists, like, whoa, you're touching one of our sacred passages, or what's going on here? Here's what it's actually saying. It's as you are going. It's a verb in Greek. Disciple them. That is your job. That's what the Shema said to do with your children. That is your job. Your job is as you are going. It's a verb. Disciple them. You can't make a disciple. The Holy Spirit does it. What you're to do is to disciple them. Isn't that cool? That's your one job. As you're going, disciple them. Keep going.
So we are giving you that challenge, and you're about to start your careers, and you must remember that one day you'll look back on all this and you'll be at retirement.
Yeah, we're kind of laughing about this. So we're going to tell new folks that are just starting their career that what you need to be thinking about is one day you're going to be replaced. It'll help you stay focused. Understand that you're about to start your life and start your career, and there's going to be one day when somebody quicker, smarter, and younger takes your job. And you know what they're going to do when your retirement comes? They're going to replace you. Because that's not your real job. What's your real job?
To disciple them.
To disciple them. That's your real job. And the quicker you realize that, medicine is incredible and it's what God's giving. He's giving you that as an opportunity to do your real job. That's why when you're retired, they're just going to replace you. So realize that that's not what your real job is.
So he always sends our boys like quotes and scripture or just notable quotes. Anyway, one thing he always says to them is, a wise man thinks of death every day.
That sounds morbid, but it's a wise man thinks of death every day, because what it does is it frames him and makes him focus on what matters. A wise man thinks of death every day.
Okay.
All right, where are we? We better get going here, Rob. We got to wrap it up. It's 5:11. Where are we, Meredith? I'm supposed to be telling you where we are.
So, I know, the great adventure is discovering God's will for your life. Don't miss it. You will live as a minority in this culture. That's why it's so great to have the Christian Medical and Dental Association, because we are a minority. We are not even in medicine, we're not isolated from the culture anymore. But we just have a few words about spouse and children.
Real quick.
Wives, this is quotes from John Eldridge. You might have heard Wild at Heart, John Eldridge. Wives, know your man, know your husband. Deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight.
Listen to this. This is so true. Women, if you understand this about us weird men, it'll go a long way. Deep, I love this. This is so good, because then we're going to hit the women next. Deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight. If you take that out of your man, if you won't let him fight a battle, you are, like a better word, you're neutering him. That's what you're doing. Every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live. He wants to live an adventure, and a beauty to rescue. He wants to rescue. He wants to feel like he is needed, and he's needed to rescue you. That's what a man longs for.
And I live in a fraternity house, so
Yeah.
there's
She has
always a
4 of
battle
us.
to fight in my house. 4 men in my house.
So what are the men supposed to look at?
Can you say the quote again, sir?
Oh, yes.
Deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. But
Men in the room, if you really stop and think about it, that's exactly what you live for.
But husbands, know your woman. You'll find that every woman in her heart of hearts longs for three things:
And listen to how these fit together.
to be romanced, to play an irreplaceable role in that great adventure, in a great adventure,
She wants to be needed and play an irreplaceable role in that great adventure, in that vision that you're supposed to be casting.
and to unveil her beauty. That's what makes a woman come alive.
I just think John Elders did a great job there. Just a quick statement about what do men look like and what do women look like. That's pretty cool.
So what about your children?
What about your children, man?
Quickly, very similar, regardless of what this culture tells you, boys and girls are very different.
Yeah.
Your sons long to hear from mom and dad, you have what it takes. You can do it.
And here's the best example. Anybody in here have little boys or had little boys? This is going to happen. I wonder if there's ever been a case on the faces or some 2, 3, 4-year-old boy. He jumps on the sofa. He then gets on the ledge of the sofa, and he yells to dad. Probably if the dad's there, he yells to dad and says, "What's this?" What's he going to do? He's jumping off. What is he begging for mom and dad to tell him? You got what it takes. You're a warrior. You got it. That's what a little boy's looking for. What's a girl looking for?
Little girl wants to hear, "You're beautiful."
You're
She
beautiful.
puts on her princess dress and poses
Yeah.
and says,
And what does she
"How
say?
do I look,
How do I
Daddy?"
look? And this culture is going to tell you those distinctions don't exist. That is a lie. That is a lie. They do exist. And if you nurture that, you'll create some beautiful children.
So why does this matter?
Why does it matter, Meredith?
Because your one job is to disciple them.
Starting with your
Yes.
spouse and your children.
So in summary, life is hard. Learn to walk with a limp. God wants your attention. Look for his divine appointments. Life is an adventure. Do your one job to disciple as you are going.
That's it.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. Now you engage where God is at work. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you will be notified of future episodes.